Welcome back to Respect the Drive. I'm Tedward, and today my guest from the Money Shift podcast and YouTube channel is Thanasi Chalkiadakis. He has his finger on the pulse of everything new. It's incredible how much he knows about new cars. But before we jump into that, I know it's been a week or two since the podcast has aired. Things have been going well. YouTube is going incredibly well. As of yesterday, I hit 80,000 subscribers. I mean, when I quit my job earlier this year, I think I was only at maybe 30,000, and things just are starting to take off. Views are more consistent. It's incredible, and I have you to thank for that. So thank you so much for making that possible. It's incredible. But it doesn't mean all my days are great, because I go and I get my views and I'm earning some money, which is nice. It's nice to earn a little bit of money, know that you're going to be able to eat that day. No, I still go to work every day, right? And if I'm not filming a car or hunting a car or editing a car, I'm doing freelance photography for people to sell their cars and things like that. And, with any job, and I'll tell you, it's so much better than the corporate life, because I think that was just really infuriating for me. But like any job, you're going to have times when things just piss you off. And that's fine. I won't go into details about that. But what I will say is the byproduct of getting pissed off at work is being pissed off on their way home. And I haven't had road rage in a long time, and I still haven't. I'm not going to say I got road rage, but a guy in a box truck threw a fountain soda out the window on 495 on a 3-lane highway, just launched it out the window, exploded right in front of my car, and coated the M3 in Sprite. And that pissed me off more than seeing someone flick a cigarette butt out the window. And by the way, I think flicking a cigarette butt out the window is like the trashiest thing a human being can do. You're already smoking in your car. Just put it in the ashtray. Like, your car already is unsellable because it smells disgusting. And now you're going to throw a lit filter out the window and hopefully it goes out before it starts a fire, or otherwise it's just littering. It's gross. Oh my God. I think the penalty for throwing a cigarette butt out the window should be minimum 10 years. 10 years in a maximum security prison. But is there any karma for those people? I don't know if it happens. I mean, maybe that box truck exploded in a big fiery wreck shortly after he threw a Sprite on my car. But probably not. He's probably just going to go home and eat ice cream and jerk off and go to bed tonight. And everything's fine. He's just living his life. He's just living his Sprite throwing life. I'm just sick of cleaning up after people. That drives me nuts. I know I was at a Chipotle recently with some friends after off-roading, and I just sat in the car. They went in, got their burritos, and I watched this family of 4 people, 2 parents, 2 kids. Oh, each of them opened a door, and they just pushed dozens of bags and cups and just fast food junk into the parking lot and drove away. And we watched this. They just drove away. Oh, the people who clean this will come get it. And they did. The girl from Chipotle came out and cleaned it up, and she looked pissed. But maybe I got to look at it from the other direction. It's not that there's these shitty people who never get theirs. It's that it brought some of the good people together. When things like that happen, a few people got together and cleaned up that junk. They helped that girl, and they were like, wow, that was disgusting, wasn't it? And you kind of laugh about it, and you're like, okay, I feel a little better. It's not like everyone just said, yeah, just leave it. Just leave it. But it is important to look on the bright side of things. So when I get frustrated, I think about what does relax me. One of the things that relaxes me is the fact that my M5 is safe and sound on a battery tender in a secure, climate-controlled environment at Garage 42 in Woburn, Massachusetts. And if you need to store your car for the winter, for the indefinite future, just you have your supercar, your baby, you want to keep it nice and safe, that's the place to go. Garage42.com, Woburn, Massachusetts. All right, now that I'm done filling the prison systems with people flicking cigarette butts out their car windows, let's jump into it. Here's Thanasi. how have you been? What's going on with you? Because I've wanted to have you on this podcast for a while, not just because we're podcast friends, because you have the money shift, and it's like, hey, you want to be on my podcast? And then you do it, and they go, hey, you want to be on my podcast?
Yeah.
But because unlike you, I almost never know what's going on in the current automotive world. Like I am still shocked that the V70R was discontinued 15 years ago. Okay. So like there are times when and this is why I think I like Lamborghini, because they just let it ride for 30 years. Like the Aventador has been out since I was 9. Like
okay. So what you're telling me is the brand that you most align to right now is Nissan,
Yeah.
because every single one of their products is almost 10 plus years
They're
old,
still-
including the car that they released yesterday.
Yes. When they released the 400, that's what it's called, right? The 400Z, is that where we're at?
The Proto, well, also that, but then the QX55. Did you see this? This is like their coupe SUV based on the QX50 that looks exactly like a QX50.
My comfort zone is that they're still basically making VQ35s.
Oh, for sure. I mean, you're not far off. Let's be real.
But what's your living situation these days? How are you doing in that regard?
It's good. I mean, as you know, we recently had a week that was like 50 or 60 degrees, which was exceptional to not only get out and drive, but also get out and walk. And I think I've explored this last couple days trying to do the same thing, but being met with 30 degrees, which doing that 20 degree delta slapped me harder than Mike Tyson in the face. And I'm refusing to accept we're there now.
Yeah, people who don't live, I mean, you lived in California for a little while, but like people who aren't from here, they think like, oh, you're used to it. No, we're never used to it. We're never, ever used to it. And then when you complain about it, they go, well, then just move. And it's like, yeah, but you have poisonous animals. Like I will gladly take the freeze, the beautiful natural selection that happens that just makes sure that like I'll never get bit by a deadly snake in the woods.
Yeah.
Like I will scream at the snake for sure, but it's probably not going to kill me.
It's crazy that there's cons to everywhere, right? It's like if you want to live in Australia or New Zealand, every single animal's going to kill you. If you want to live in California, it's animals and earthquakes and fires. If you want to live in Texas, it's other people. If you want to live in Florida, it's humidity. Did you
feel the earthquake we had like a week ago?
Yeah, it was like a 4 on the Richter scale.
It was a legitimate earthquake. This wasn't like the bullshit where you say, hey, there was an earthquake, and then your California friend immediately goes, oh, man, you don't even know. We're so used to it. No, this was like a legitimate earthquake in Massachusetts, and my home is like a 2-story, like, you know, like a fairly normal, like, suburban 2-story home. Sure. And my bedroom is like on the top floor, and it's the highest part of the house because it's we have a 2-car under garage. So it's like where I sleep. If you were to look out the window, it's like a 40-foot drop to the driveway. And
okay, nice.
Yeah. And my dad, it's a great end if I really need to, you know, things go wrong. You just jump out the window. My dad, he's been like, he's always tinkering. He's always redoing things on the house. And he's been redoing the garage to the level that he's replacing like the support beams in the garage.
Oh, okay.
So, cut to that day. I'm in bed. It's like 9:00 or whatever it is. I don't know, because I sleep in. Sure. I don't get up unless.
No, I also sleep at 9.
I do not. Yeah. So no judgment here, people. Okay. But anyway, so the house is like shaking, like violently, and I'm like watching a thing, like my shelf. There's like this little wicker shelf because it's my fucking parents' house, so there's wicker. So
of course,
the shelf is like hitting the wall. It's like wobbling back and forth, and I'm thinking, oh my God, he really fucked it up this time. He is collapsing the house.
It's the end.
And I got up and I went, oh no. And then it stopped and I went back to bed. So all I'm thinking is, oh my God, he's really done it this time. And so I go downstairs and then I turn on the news and local news is like earthquake. And I'm like, oh wow, I was so quick to jump to the fact that my father was destroying our home that earthquake didn't really register in my brain.
Yeah, it's great when hearing that it was an earthquake brought a sigh of relief.
Oh, I was like,
that situation.
The thing was,
which I don't think it does for most people.
No, and I was like, he goes, and they didn't feel it. Nobody else in the house felt it. I'm like,
Interesting.
I'm like, what is this? Is like, I know you're older. I know, but you maybe don't hear things as well. But like, you didn't feel the whole earth move.
Right. It just exposed everyone who didn't follow the IKEA instruction of bolting their closets to the wall.
It's so true. And and then he just walked around like cock of the walk, big source of pride. Like, my house did not fall down. And he was very into it. Yeah, he liked that.
That's awesome.
But otherwise, it's been fine living with my parents, aside from like the occasional conversations that I'll hear while I'm editing. Like I set up in my dining room, and like that's my little office.
Yeah, sure.
And like today, my dad was reheating some soup in the microwave, and I hear this, as one does, and I hear this conversation where my mother, she's looking at her iPad, and she casually asks him, "How long did you put it in for?" And he goes, 4 minutes and 25 seconds, and she goes, "Are you nuts?" As if he just cut the green wire instead of the blue wire on like the time bomb. And all you hear is the gentle hum of the microwave as it's like boiling, and it. And these are the conversations that like sustain me when I hear.
That's amazing microwave discipline, though, because for me, I don't know about you, but I can't put anything in a microwave longer than 1 minute. Because if I do, around the 45-second mark, I'm like, it's probably fine.
It's
fine.
I
just grab it.
Oh my God. I was just laughing so hard because it was as if he was just like going to like A, injure himself, and she was very concerned, or B, blow up the house with the soup. I don't.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Oh my God. So all right, let's talk cars. We recently just rolled out our my dad has a 72 Corvette. I think I told you about this before. And we moved it for the first time in and don't get excited. I mean, we rolled it.
Okay, I was going to say, this is years, right?
Yeah, it's just because it was in the garage. They're putting up all this new insulation and drywall. Basically, I think they're planning on moving me into it because that garage is starting to look really fucking nice. And I'm like, is this my new home?
That sounds fantastic.
I don't know. It very well might be the case. But so we moved that outside, and it looks like a Bizzarini under the cover right now. So I think the neighbors, it's been in that garage for so long, most of the neighbors, like the new neighbors, don't even know the car exists. So they're looking in our driveway. They usually see the weird shit I have, but they have no idea what's under this cover. Which brings me to the idea that car shapes used to be much more distinctive. Mm-hmm. And today, or yesterday, I don't know or care, Honda released this new Civic.
On Twitch?
What? I want to hear what you have to say about this first.
Yeah, so for me, under the excuse me, this is actual truth, that what we're looking at
Facts.
is the Civic, and I'm talking base Civic, right? We're not looking at an SI, we're not looking at a Type R, we're looking at something that competes with a Jetta. We're looking at something that competes with a Mazda 3, a Hyundai Elantra. I think it looks fantastic.
You just you just like shut me down before I even opened my mouth. Okay, all right.
But to your point about cars lacking any sort of design elements, this thing does look remarkably similar to a lot of other vehicles in the segment, right? Like, you can't not look at the back of this and see Jetta or Accord.
Or A3. Like, it's unreal.
Yeah, totally. But for something that probably costs like 23 grand,
I'm with you on that. And I think I know for a fact Honda usually does a good job making these cars like handle really well, and they're fun they're playful. They have big competition with the Mazda 3 because the Mazda 3 just got more power, didn't it? Didn't they just bring out like some big boy shit?
2.5 liter turbo. I think it does 0 to 60 in the 5s for all-wheel drive with an automatic.
Do you know what I would have done to have a car that did 0 to 60 in the 5s when I was in high school or college? Like, I had a Celica GTS from 2000, so that's that like Yamaha 1.8 liter. Yeah, the VVT
that's
Li.
That's a rocket.
Very cool. It was a Lotus engine, the lease engine, and it revved to 8250. I had the first year of it before they realized they probably shouldn't fucking rev that high, so they knocked it down.
That's a great car. Very great car.
That always made me feel real comfortable when the 2000 revved like 300 RPM or 200 RPM higher than the subsequent like 3 years of production. I'm like, I wonder if they figured something out and I shouldn't be redlining this car.
Right.
Still didn't matter. But Yeah, that was 0 to 60 in 6.6 seconds. So now you've got like boring is a mean term because it's not boring, but like what would be one of the most boring segments in the automotive world now does like 5 seconds to 60, which is crazy.
The fact that, modern cars like the Challenger whatever cat is making 1 bajillion horsepower, we've become desensitized to the fact that a Toyota Sienna is faster than like a 70s Ferrari.
Well, that's the thing. When we were kids, you used to make fun of like, oh, it's a Camry. I'm like, dude, V6 Camry and Accord have always been the benchmark for what you're allowed to call quick, because if you can't beat a V6 Camry, you ain't quick.
Right. Definitely. And the new ones are quick.
That's the rule. It's like 300 horsepower. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Civic, what I liked about the Civic was it never made any sense. If you looked at a Honda lineup, you'd look at the Civic and go, who fucked who to get that child? Like that was adopted. That was out of wedlock. Definitely. Like something happened. This design is not Honda. But now suddenly it's like, yeah, it's definitely an Accord Light. It has that vibe.
It very much so fits into the ecosystem of Accord and Insight. It does follow that Honda design language. It looks infinitely better, I think, than the existing Civic sedan, like by a lot.
Is it bad that's why I like the existing Civic sedan, because it's ugly? Like I look at that car and I'm like, that is awful. People are like, the Type R, that is awful. I'm like, that's exactly why I'd want it.
Oh, I mean, yeah, former Type R owner here. I do agree that the quirkiness of the existing generation Civic is great. I will say, though, that the sort of patented images of what the hatchback version of this Civic looks like is just as weird. So it's not like a conventional hatchback. Like you look at the current Civic right now and you see that sort of body line that the hatchback has. It's not a Golf, it's not a Megane or whatever. It's just a weird looking thing.
Yeah.
And this one is gonna be the same thing with just a kind of prettier rear end. So.
Okay. All right. I'll have more questions as it comes, and I always try not to be too critical on things that I haven't seen in person yet, because I'm nothing ever makes sense when you see them in pictures until you see them in person. Then it adds up. Which brings me to the new BRZ, which I think was today, right? That was really just came out.
Big shout out to Subaru. 9 a.m. was the release of this car today.
Yeah,
I love that. They missed rolling out of bed.
I didn't.
Launch.
I woke up at 9:30. Man, I woke up and I just looked at my thing. I was like, oh shit, are these spy photos? Man, they really unleashed everything. This was a big leak. And then I'm like, oh, this was the actual announcement.
Yeah. Contrary to the Civic reveal, they did it in the morning and it lasted like 35-40 minutes and they were done. So it was great.
At a glance, I'm like very excited technically for this car, because although you might think, based on the cars that I've driven, I would really have liked a turbo BRZ. I do believe that the BRZ is meant to be like the purest form of economical sports car, which to me is naturally aspirated. So I'm very happy with this new platform and the 7,500 RPM redline and a whole bunch more torque down low. I think the car is going to be just such a treat to drive. Styling wise, I think it's a kind of a letdown because it looks very bulbousy in the front and rear, and the front gives me like panic attacks of like Model Y-ness. And Tesla is just the ugliest shit you can imagine in my brain. Like when I think of like, ooh, what's bad car design? I'm like, Tesla. I'm not shitting on the functionality of Teslas. They're fine. They're great. They're great. But like, I don't look at a Tesla and think, wow, man, I wish I could design a car like that.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm definitely all in on the new BRZ. I mean, they gave it more power. It weighs like 15 pounds more than the outgoing model. It's a lot more rigid, so the fact that there's small weight difference and it's I think it's like 50% more rigid, somehow has a lower center of gravity. Like,
I don't know how you go lower.
This car by a spec sheet, but
how do you go? The BRZ, the charm of the BRZ is that it has an incredibly low center of gravity, which is the reason why that's why it's a Subaru. It's because it needs that flat four, that you know what I mean, like that boxer engine, and like that's why you can't. That's one of the reasons they don't go and do turbo systems and stuff, because it's messing up with the packaging, and it's just not really like a cohesive system that they like. And to be honest, every turbo or supercharged BRZ I've driven aftermarket is not cohesive. They all have problems. They all overheat. They all have packaging issues. They all have like, oh yeah, I had to like notch the frame here to get this here. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's not the answer, man. You know, it's like, I know you want more power, but like, let's not break things.
Yeah, and the only competition here is really the RF Miata, which is like $33,000.
It's
so
an
this
expensive
is gonna
car.
be cheaper than that car, and you can't compare this. This isn't, you know, a Supra competitor or a Mustang Camaro competitor. There's nothing else in this class. This car is good. This car is good.
If they made the like clutch and shifter more tactile and more like and less dampened in this car, then I will literally start praising the gospel of Subaru. I'm ready for that. But if they didn't, then I'm going to be like, all right, who's in the aftermarket who's going to make this car feel like a Porsche? Because it could.
Definitely
could.
Definitely. And they're finally offering it with not Prius tires. I don't know if you saw that
PS4
in the press photos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dude,
that was huge.
Michelin is, I don't know who their team is, but they have pushed over the last like 5 to 7 years to become the tire brand. Like Pirelli used to brag about, oh, I've got a set of Pirellis. Now when I see Pirellis, sure. I go, ugh, gross. Like when I say, I have never driven a Pirelli that could do the things that a Pilot Super Sport or, you know, unless we're talking about like their R compounds, that, you know, that's different. But,
right. Yeah,
but
totally. For a daily driver or like even sometime track machine, it's tough to beat their tire.
Or they'll be fine in the dry. Like Pirelli is definitely like a bad relationship where it's like things are so good with us, except, you know, then he drinks a little bit and he's really nasty. It's like once the Pirelli gets wet, you're like, oh, we're fucked. Curtains, man. It's a totally different animal. Whereas like that's what I'm loving about this Michelin life lately. I'm hoping other brands come along. There's brands like Vredestein that are starting to make big splashes in the American market. And I've got a set for the winters. I'm looking forward. I should be getting a set of Vredestein, whatever their like high performance summer tire is. Because I'm really like, I want other, you know, I'm always the underdog rooter.
Sure. So I'm with that.
I would like to have other options. I don't want to be stuck. Not to say I'm stuck with a Michelin PS4S, but it's nice to have options, and it's nice to be like, good, there's friendly competition.
Right. How are they priced in relation to the Michelins of the world?
Like, honestly, I couldn't tell you. I think they're probably lower, but I'm not positive. Like, I'm pretty sure the Wintrack Pros that I have on my M3, I think they were cheaper than a Blizzak.
Okay.
So yeah, I think
it is interesting to see how the different brands approach pricing, right? Because you have companies like Falcon that are making Advent AO52 competitors that are just a touch below but perform almost as well, and that's great. And then you have companies like Nankang that for whatever reason make the AR1 and it's unbelievable.
They are so bizarre. They're like they are like the underdog of R compound tires. Like people went from like, oh, I always run an RE71R to like, yeah, actually I just run Nankangs now. And everyone's like, who? And the only reason anyone knows who they are is because people have banners like across their cars that say Nankang.
Sure.
And you're like, wait, what tire are you running? And then
it's crazy that the stigma went away so fast with Nankang.
Instantly, like because they never got the Linglong crosswind like bullshit, because that's never leaving. Sorry, Linglong. It's not.
No way. Tiger Paw, done for life.
Tiger Paw.
Done for life.
Dude. And then you've got, it's weird how tire brands have cachet. Like, what? Man, it makes no fucking sense. It's like, people who don't even know anything about tire technology like would look at a tire and go, "Oh, I don't want that." It's like which cigarette are you smoking? It's like, do you even know the difference between the taste, or you just like want to be seen with Marlboro Reds?
Yeah. Right. I mean, the R888's the perfect example of that, right? That's the streetwear of the tire world.
I know.
If you have the R888s, you instantly have clout, regardless of how horrendous they are in any sort of rain, or how loud they are at speeds over 30 miles an hour on the highway.
That's why I run them on my 911, because it's the only car it's appropriate in, because everything else is louder than those tires, so you never notice them.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good
But
point.
if you see like an Avon tire, you're like, oh, this belongs on the Aston DB5, you know, like,
right.
and yeah, there's just this weird thing where even tread pattern has like appeal on certain cars. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you saw like a Michelin PS4S on a vintage Aston Martin or Maserati, it would look weird. You're like, no, I want the waffles that make no sense and definitely don't evacuate any water.
Totally.
I want it to look the part.
God, tires. It's so interesting that how much has changed with tires in how short of time. Like we were just saying, Nankang went from zero to hero. Michelin is now the god, and Toyo's making more clout than ever before. So.
Well, and they were even a fashion statement too, because I mean, here we're talking about tread, where you see like an R888R and everyone can identify it, or a Nitto NT01 or an RE71. You're like, oh yeah, that's an aggressive tire. I know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
But like, think about our Parents' Day. They're like, oh yeah, I got a set of white walls. What?
Vogues.
Who the fuck cares? What the?
Yeah, you bet.
Why? I sometimes I really like. It's genius marketing. It's like you literally have I mean, we go out and get wheels, right? We're like, oh yeah, we got these sick wheels. But like every wheel in the 50s and 60s would have been just a chrome hubcap. So it's like, well, every wheel is identical. And then you get these white walls. Like that's the sex appeal of your car, that you're like, oh yeah, keep them super white.
Wait, so I'll never forget this. When I first moved out to Los Angeles, my first week, I went to the local mall because I needed to furnish an entire apartment. And the first car that I encountered pulling into the mall parking lot was a white, new Jaguar XJ L that had white walls, and it was on wire wheels.
Oh
and
my
it was
God.
the coolest thing I've ever seen. And I'm talking about, I saw, the only carbon-bodied EB110 SS in the world. I saw
Can you
CLK
imagine
LM cars, but nope, that Jaguar XJ on white walls. I don't know what in the hell was possessing that person, but whatever it was fantastic, and I appreciated every second of it.
There was a Jag, like a late 90s or early 2000s Jag. Was it? Oh my God! You know what? Let's just, for the sake of argument, what was before the Type S or S Type? What was before that? It was like a longer, sleeker. It was like an XJ or
I think they called them like the Vandenpla and was like the different models, but
right? Because it looked kind of like
the sedan.
Yeah, it was like a limo-y kind of thing, very nice and flat but long. So this guy had you reminded me of this completely, because it was like a deep purpley maroon color, a little bit of metallic flake.
Fantastic.
And he had a double Jaguar emblem on the front. It was a Jaguar fucking a Jaguar on the hood. And I'm like, and I walked by it was like right in front of like the Section 8 housing. So I just imagine this dude was an actual pimp. I've never seen him. I don't know who he is, but the only person that could have been getting in and out of that car was wearing a coat down to the floor. Like,
yeah. I guess my affinity with that vehicle could probably be tied to the fact that when I was 16 and a half, I was an hour away from purchasing a 2004 Jaguar XJR as my first car, which was like the long hood, long trunk, supercharged thing.
That's like pretty badass.
My parents were remarkably okay with, just because of how big it was, and none of them looked at the stat sheet, even though my father knew what it was. But
they're
my
like,
mother
that's
did not
okay.
understand.
They're like, he'll be fine. The car will definitely die before he has time to get in an accident.
Yeah, exactly. And I've managed to purchase the only car deemed more unreliable than a Jaguar XJR, and I'm loving every second of it.
Yeah. So actually, let's talk about that, because you do have an affinity for these big cars. A lot of people, I think, locally know you for like, oh, he's got a Civic Type R. You have the little EG, or is it EG hatch? What was the EK?
Yeah, that's gone too.
That's
it
gone
was an
too.
EK hatch. Yeah.
You had the S2000. I think the S2000 was what most people in the area knew you for. But
Sure.
you drove a Phaeton.
Yep. 2005 Volkswagen Phaeton with the 4.2 V8, because contrary to popular belief, I do like my wallet, even though I bought that car.
Yeah,
so
you
I didn't get the W12.
Yeah, you definitely chose like the non-Enron version of this investment.
For sure. For sure. This was a couple's snowbird car. So when they weren't in Florida, they were driving their Phaeton in Massachusetts. So it was an 05, bought brand new, has 80,000 miles. It just got done with a service that was almost more expensive. It was a routine service, but it was almost more expensive than what I paid for the car. So they did the timing, they did the water pump, and they did the second battery because this car has 2 batteries.
Shut up.
And the service cost, I think, like $4,500.
Did they do this at Volkswagen? I imagine they went to a dealership.
Yep, I bought this from their service manager who was like representing them because they were in Florida and just wanted to get rid of the car. I bought it effectively from the dealer.
That car probably single-handedly paid for like health insurance for multiple employees for its entire life.
Yeah, and shockingly, so this car gets a bad rap, right? If anyone knows the Phaeton, the first thing that comes to mind is, holy cow, this car is immensely expensive to maintain. But what people are kind of forgetting is how much tech is in this car. And with cars of that era, if you screw up one thing tech-wise, you're actually screwing up 10 things.
Yes.
So if you just bring it to someone that knows what the hell they're doing, you're largely okay. So this car has never had to go through anything that wasn't mandatory and in the manual. It never had like an airbag brake because they got serviced. It never had any of that stuff. Never has had any really big problems. And surprisingly enough, we have a lot of Phaeton mechanics in the area, Phaeton certified mechanics, people that know that you have to press 2 buttons to put the car into jack mode before you lift it up, things like that. So I'm really hopeful that this car, at least lasts me a year. And if not, it was like a $7,000 car that I'm getting to enjoy. I love this thing so much.
I mean, it makes sense if the car never took off. Number one, first of all, in a used market, I mean, God, unless you have big money and you know where to get parts, like run from the W12, right? Like that's not...
Oh, without a doubt. And they're actually going up in price, by the way, the W12. It's like 20 grand for one now.
I guess they're probably just rare because people are just like, yeah, crush it.
yeah, I can't deal with this anymore. No,
that's
thanks.
Unreal. Yeah, so people are excited about that, but your car is basically like a nicer A8, but with a Volkswagen badge on it.
Yeah, it's like a Continental Flying Spur with an A8 engine and a Volkswagen badge, because it actually has more in common with the Bentley than the Audi, but it has the Audi engine.
That's so nuts.
So yeah, the car has stupid things like a dehumidifier, so it never fogs any of the windows on the inside. It has the vents that replicate central air. I mean, everyone's seen the Top Gear video on the car, regardless of their affinity for it. But yeah, I learn new things every day with this thing, and I love it.
So Volkswagen was never really able to change their so when they came out with the Phaeton, it felt like they were trying to be more premium and show what they could do and do this whole thing. But like reputation and marketing means a lot. I mean, VW is the people's car, and now suddenly you want people to believe you're capable of producing, or you should come buy $100,000 Volkswagen, right, or 80, whatever it costs.
For sure.
Probably.
Yeah, they thought they were above it, right?
Yeah, and so I guess my question to you is, because you usually have like your finger on the pulse of the automotive community in these brands. Have you ever seen a brand like radically shift their audience? And I think the only one I can think of that's kind of doing it, but still like really dragging an anchor, is Hyundai with Genesis.
Yeah, that was probably the example I was thinking of, and I would actually use them as a failure but then turn success, because they tried to do it under the Hyundai moniker, offering cars like the Genesis, like the Equus, like the Genesis Coupe, things like that, but they couldn't get people to buy the Equus, so they had to make a standalone brand called Genesis that now actually can sell cars. But I can't think of, I mean, Kia's tried to do it, still tries to do it with the Stinger and the K900. You have maybe Mazda is actually probably the best example of a company that's gone from zoom, peppy economical bullshit to now they're considered. I actually recommend the CX-5 to every person that wants a small SUV.
Agreed.
Which is like my entire friends list on Facebook. So
yeah,
it is like they've come around, and I think they're actually starting to convince a lot of people.
I mean, because typically the formula is you don't try to change a brand, you just create a new brand. Like you do what Toyota and Lexus did. You do what Honda, Acura, that kind of thing. Well, I guess we don't really want to talk about Acura in that regard anymore. But in the day, it was
sure.
They were doing a great job. It's very difficult to say like, hey, I'm Volkswagen, remember me, and then be like, here, instead of the $16,000 brand new Jetta, here's an $80,000 luxury car with the same emblem.
Right, totally. And what's interesting about the Volkswagen Phaeton specifically is people say all the time, well, they had the Bentley and they had the Audi A8, so why did they even make the Phaeton? And the answer was because they thought the A8 was like the driver's car in the segment, so they thought there was room to go for the S-Class with the Phaeton. And I thought that was hilarious.
Bonkers.
The fact that they thought that the A8 was like a driver's car of the group. And I know the D2 S8 is a fantastic car to drive. It is really, really fun, the big boat. But the D3 S8 is not like it's not anything crazy.
No.
So that was interesting. But I think Mazda did that conversion sort of the best, right? They started with their big SUV. The CX-9 was really that first thing to go more premium, and then whittled it down to now the Mazda 3 is an A3 competitor. It's not a Civic competitor anymore.
No, and sometimes I just wonder, like, what do those meetings look like? And so for example, it's really easy to look in hindsight at the Phaeton and like the planning behind the marketing strategy and be like, that was destined to fail. You were never going to make that really sell and work under this brand. But leading up to it, I can imagine like the enthusiasm behind like executives and decision makers. But were they just foggy? Were they just having like a moment, and where there's just such a hierarchy that nobody below them had either the authority or the guts to stand up and say, like, this is a really bad idea?
Yeah, and it's funny that they missed the mark so much in the U.S., but kind of sort of hit it everywhere else, because here the car only sold for 2 years, right? It was Earth 3, 04, 05, 06. That's it.
Right.
But everywhere else, it lived till 2016. So there was a small contingent of the world that had massive success in China, but there was a small contingent of the world that did appreciate it. It's just USA is all about badge. If you don't have it, we're not buying it. And nothing was more clear than this car.
Absolutely. Now, I remember I don't want to spend too much time on the Phaeton, but I have to, because this is the only time I'm ever going to talk about a fucking Phaeton. So there was a commercial for the W12 Phaeton. I don't think they specified it, but in the commercial, it was a W12. And it was a guy and his little son in the car, and they're driving, and his dad says something like, "Don't touch the button, don't touch the button, don't touch the button." And then it's like the hazard lights, and he's like, "All right, touch the button." And he like hits the hazard lights, and his dad just floors it, and the kid's like, "It's a rocket ship," you know? And the whole idea is just that, like, oh, this thing fucks. Like,
yeah.
And it was totally appealed to me because my nickname from my dad was Buttons, because if there was a fucking button, I was pressing it.
That's
like,
hilarious.
So he saw that commercial and he's just like, oh my God, it's you.
Yeah. No, and it's funny because even the V8 one does get up and go. I mean, it weighs 5,200 pounds, but it's got 350 horsepower.
Yeah, it still goes.
Yeah, it scoots. It is what it is. But yeah, no, so far it hasn't cost me an arm and a leg, just some HID bulbs, so I'll take it.
I don't want to blow up your spot, but what else do you look after? Because whenever you come back with a car, I'm usually a little surprised, and I go, huh, I didn't think of that. Like what's on your mind now? Like what are you lusting after?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when I was looking at the Phaeton, just to put my sort of like car buying mindset into words, what I was considering was a Volkswagen Phaeton, a mid-2000s Civic Si, or a 2005 Boxster S. So my mind could not be more random if it tried. Effectively, what I was trying to find was a daily driver that would last for at least a year and I didn't have to put any money into, and then I could probably get out of the car for the price that I'm into it, i.e. buying something on the bottom of its depreciation curve. In terms of what I'm lusting after next, I mean, I don't know. I'll be frank. Like, this BRZ is really, really nice to me.
Yeah.
I really do like this new BRZ. Other cars that randomly speak to me are like the new generation Kia K900, just because, like, speaking of underdogs, like I think it's a killer looking sedan.
I agree.
It has a really good engine, and it's just super underappreciated, like I feel the Phaeton is. So I'm a big underdog supporter. So that's why I really like those cars.
How do you feel about the new RS6?
It's crazy that Audi was able to release a car within the Volkswagen Audi group that also has wagons like the Porsche Panamera Sport Turismo, and it already be eclipsed by everything that's out. Usually what happens is you see a new car released and it's the fastest in the segment. It's the most tech-laden in the segment. It's the most attractive. But they released the RS6 and it was already the slowest. It wasn't even faster than the E63S. Never mind the Porsche that's in the same wheelhouse.
So what you're saying is Volkswagen Group has not evolved their marketing prowess and decision-making skills since the Phaeton.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because there's so much freaking hype in this damn RS6. I bet you if you made an RS6 video, it would loop to the top of the charts tomorrow. Well, it's not because the car's any good, and it might be great.
No, their marketing on that car was incredible. They made this wicked emotional commercial with I
loved it.
It's great. They hit every mark. They're like a biracial couple with this beautiful little kid, and they have like this cute dating story, and it's just,
right.
I mean, they literally hit every mark of every, like, they had like a cool female driver. They had it had everything. It was like a Stefan's Club for New York and SNL's Weekend Update. Like, they've got everything.
For sure.
And then like the car came out and it was kind of cool. You'd see some of like the press launch stuff because they were literally just launching the car and everything. But then I started looking at like I can't get over these wheels. I absolutely cannot get over the 21-inch OEM wheels that are basically like required mechanically because otherwise you wouldn't be able to fit those obnoxious brakes, which again, if you need brakes that big, I feel like you're covering up a bigger problem, i.e. weight. Like, why
for sure
you don't need that. Those brakes are insane. And is it cool? Sure. I mean, the GT500 has monster brakes too, and it's fun to look at. But like, what are you doing, man? And how are you supposed to be like, I mean, that is a dunk, okay? When we were in high school, 21s were like, you'd be like ghost riding next to them while you did your rap video. Okay?
Those are Escalade wheels. They're for sure
ridiculous. Yeah. I can't accept that.
No, I'm with you, and I think it was really funny to see a lot of people try to defend the car. I was at the LA Auto Show when they unveiled it, and they had it positioned next to an RS Q8. And that car, okay, like I can justify big wheels. I get it. I can justify big brakes because it's a big SUV trying to do big things.
Sure.
But I don't know. It just didn't make sense to me. And I go back to every time whenever people talk about the size of the wheels and brakes to the Bentley Continental GT3R. Do you remember this car?
I do. That was a cool thing.
It weighed over 5,000 pounds and its brakes were smaller. And when it came out, it had the biggest brakes on the market, but it warranted it because it was the GT3 RS of the Continental lineup, right? It's like, what the hell is this RS6 doing? No one's taking this thing to the track, so who cares, right? And
so just like balance this out, because there's a bunch of Audi people who are writing angry emails to me right now, and that's okay. Sure. Please bring them to me, and like, yes, put me in an RS6 so you can prove me wrong or whatever. But I mean, Jake Weil of Weil Motorsport, right? He's an incredible driver. He builds these race cars. He does like legit like time trial racing and stuff. Like he's starting to get into wheel-to-wheel stuff, but. One of the things that he has always done with his M3s, and he's set like incredible lap times on Palmer and all these local tracks, he always uses stock calipers and rotors, and he pad slams this thing. And I'm like,
awesome.
And if you go to a racetrack paddock and you look around at every other car, they're on like stop techs, they're on these monster brakes, and then you got Jake over here who's beating them all, and he's on these little dinky friggin' things, and it's hilarious. And I'm like, I know maybe that's only going to last you so long or whatever, but there's something to be said for the fact that like people think they need these monster brakes. They do not. They just don't.
Yeah, we're talking 16.5-inch front brakes.
Those are larger than the wheels on my first Volkswagen. I had a Golf, and so that you hear that, Audi fanboys, I had a Volkswagen, and I loved it.
Yeah, and I think, and if you were to tell me, Thanasi, the RS6 is probably a fantastic daily driver, and a great runabout, I totally agree. But it's not as good as the Sport Turismo, in my opinion, from Porsche.
It's not as good looking either.
Yeah, and it lags behind the E-Class, which has been out forever.
And yes, it's older, and it looks the business. I saw an E63 AMG wagon the other day.
4MATIC Plus.
Oh my
CMBC,
God.
yeah.
The way this thing moved, it wasn't speeding or anything, but it was just coming around a corner and it was like time stood still.
Yeah, was it in that like matte silvery kind of color?
It was so good. And I just, the way it sat on its own suspension was just mesmerizing. It's like not something it's like, there's an episode of Rick and Morty where Rick creates like perfect level. He's like, oh yeah, you think that's the level? Try this. And he like, he stands on it and his brain explodes because he's like, I can't believe I'm experiencing perfect level, It was like that. It was like, I've never really paid attention. I've never like felt this feeling looking at just a car driving.
Right.
It looked incredible. Like Mercedes, AMG is so cool now. I mean, they've always been cool, but I've always been more of an M person. That has shifted.
Yeah.
That has shifted a lot.
Because I think everything that you loved about M is what AMG is doing now,
Absolutely.
right? Back when, your E92, Mercedes was just making burnout machines.
Oh, for sure. They were just Hellcats. They were making C-Class Hellcats. End of list.
Yeah.
And like, was it cool? Absolutely. But like,
oh, for sure.
I mean, I've chucked a few C63s into some corners and it's like, oh, we're kind of big. And also we're on 255s. Right. And we have way too much torque for this. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly add about the Audi RS6 while I'm airing all my grievances.
Yeah, this
on
is
a
what
car
this
I've
is
never driven.
This is a venting show. Today you're here, we're here. I literally said, "Can you come on so we can just talk shit a bunch of about things that we're angry about?"
Is there anything that outdates faster than a car interior that is exclusively monitors?
So bad.
We were talking about Infiniti at the beginning of this show, and they have that ugly 2-monitor system that they're still releasing to this day, and it just outdates the car right off the lot. Nothing is going to look worse in 5 or 10 years than this Audi RS6 double monitor setup, which is going to be eclipsed by some bullshit 410K, whatever the hell we're going to call it, K monitor, or it's just going to fizzle and die, right? Bring back buttons, please.
I believe the only car that can truly get away with really modern, obviously going to be obsolete interiors is the S-Class, because you buy an S-Class knowing you're about to lose $100,000 in 24 months. And you don't care.
Yeah.
You don't care.
Right.
And like, that's the thing. You can go find S-Classes for like $3,000 right now. Like there's dozens of them. And yes, they're outdated inside, all this crap, but that's like the charm of it. Whereas like when you have like the RS6, although yes, a very expensive car but it's not the range topper. It's not an A8L. It's not an S8. I mean, it's still a 6, right? It's still that like that full size thing. It's just not appropriate to have something that outrageous in a car like that. It's not going to age well.
To your point about the S-Class, you're totally right? You buy that car understanding that what Mercedes is doing is utilizing it as a test bed for new technology. Heated armrests, heated door cards, crazy monitors, all the fragrances. You're buying into that perceived obsolescence in 5 years.
100%. Because like the only reason you buy like new S-Classes or new Maybach S550s or whatever they're called now is because you need everyone on the Upper East Side to know that you can have one. And then the second it's a year and a half old and there's a refresh or something, you better go get it, because you don't want to have the old thing, because now the guy next door is getting picked up in his new one.
Right, and they look old.
It's
by the way,
crazy.
Like the moment a new S-Class comes out, the old one looks the part. It still looks great. I'll buy a 2003 S55 AMG all day long.
But it's old news. It's old news.
Yeah.
All right. I want to talk about something else too, which I don't get into Nürburgring stuff too much because it doesn't matter to me. But number one, we've got the Mercedes AMG GT Black Series that's just taken the record away from the Aventador SVJ. However, to me, the story isn't AMG's success. It's how on earth is the record belonging to an Aventador? How is an Aventador a performance car in any shape or form? Like, does that not blow your mind?
Isn't it awesome that I think 2 or 3 of the top 5 times at the Nürburgring are Lamborghinis?
How?
And if I was to ask you, what's one brand that makes a really good track machine, Lambo probably wouldn't be in your... I bet you'd list Ferrari before Lambo, and you'd be wrong, because the Aventador SVJ, the Huracan Performante, like, they screw.
They are so fast. I don't get it. I would never. I would 100. If you said all right, pick. If you said pick 10 cars, you give me 10. Say 10 cars that are gonna be like the record holders at the Nürburgring in the modern day. It would be like a bunch of Ferraris, Pistas,
for sure.
I mean, we are talking about production cars. So we're not getting into FXK or FXX or all this other crap. Yeah. But it would take me a long time. It would be near the end of that list where I'd start embarking on the Lamborghini journey, which is like, how on earth is an Aventador, which has been around for millennia, how on earth has this car become what it is? It makes no sense to me. Makes no sense to me.
The evolution of the Aventador is supposedly, again, this is a car that I have not had the luxury of driving, but I'm merely commenting based on things that I've read or talked to. But a first-year Aventador compared to a current year Aventador S is like literally night and day. The new Aventador is actually a pleasant experience to drive, apparently, in comparison to what I'll just refer to as the ultimate valet machine, which is the first-year Aventador.
And I'm not sure. I like so that's the thing. I actually do have a lot of love for the Aventador because I have a lot of love for a V12. I have a lot of love for the design. I mean, it is the pinnacle of supercarness, but the pinnacle of supercarness does not make for a race car.
Right, and that's what makes the SVJ so funny. It's so damn fast.
It makes no sense. To me, an SVJ holding that record for as long as it did is like me coming to the track with a 1992 Volkswagen GTI and like smoking GT3 RSs.
Right.
Like they're like, what did you do to that thing? And it's just like from the ground up, completely different underneath, and it still looks like a 1992 GTI. And you're like, how is this happening?
And I don't have the number in front of me, but I think the Mercedes only beat it by like a second.
Let me check.
Right? It wasn't like night. It's not like the Lambo set a time of, for example, 7 minutes, and Mercedes came out, a couple of years later and set one of 6:40. Right? I think it beat it by like
1.35 seconds. How?
Yeah, which at Nürburgring is like botching one corner, right? Because you lose all momentum.
And when Porsche tried to take it away from them, they couldn't do it with the RS. They had to go and do the Manti Racing one.
Yeah, which was total bullshit.
Total bullshit. So I think the winner in this 100% is Lamborghini for somehow making an Aventador an actual like race car.
Totally. And the best part about this whole Nürburgring saga is that today Lamborghini just dropped the Huracan STO, which is like their ultimate evolution of the Huracan Evo. I think it weighs like 2,900 pounds.
Yeah.
It has magnesium wheels and like all this crazy GT3 looking aero. And they're probably going to take the record back, which means that Mercedes held the record for 1 week.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's just, so Lamborghini is just this total enigma to me because I love the brand for the style. I hate the brand for some of like, it's weird. I love and hate it for the same reason. I love it for style. I hate it for style. Like I get in a Huracan and all the buttons and switches, like everything makes me want to just claw my eyes out, which is why I prefer the R8 because I get in an R8 and maybe I'm just a really boring businessman who wants a black suit and a black tie. But like you get in an R8 and you're like, that's a cabin. This makes sense. Yeah. You get in a Huracan and I'm like, everything's plastic. Why is this? How is this a $300,000 car? And this toggle switch is not knurled aluminum. What is going on? Why? It doesn't.
You asked me about cars I lusted over or was thinking about, and at the beginning of the show, I always have brackets where, if I'm doing really well in life, that's the car I'm going to get. Where if I'm just doing what I'm doing now, this is the car I'm going to get. If I'm doing well, the next car for me is a gated 4.2 R8.
Oh,
without a doubt. That thing is at the bottom of its depreciation curve at around like 55, 60 grand. It's mid-engine. It's naturally aspirated. Sure, it's not the fastest thing, but who cares,
it's
man?
Fun.
They're awesome.
I drove, our friend Bolin had a gated V10 R8.
Ooh.
And it was rear wheel drive converted. And I did a video of that one in the tunnels, and that was definitely I had to blur the speeds, and maybe like a year. That's one where like a year after maybe I'll like release the actual speeds because like it was just not okay. But it was like how could I not? Like I'm gonna top it out in third, and I'm gonna hit fourth. Like this is just what's going on. That was maybe the softest clutch I've ever felt. And it was definitely slipping just a little bit. Like it never hit the next gear hard. And so my guess is it was probably on its way out. But I just remember that car being so like gentle, I think is the word. Like it wasn't aggressive at all. You get like a GT3 and you start like coming off the clutch and like things are happening right now, we're doing it now, and it's like unless you're specifically cautious and gentle with it, it's going to bite you and make you look like an idiot. This car, I'm like, I couldn't abuse it enough to make it twitch. I'm like, why are you so soft? Everything felt damped and weird. And I don't know if it was that car. Because again, we've removed a lot of weight from the front end. The steering got very light, so I had I had a little bit of concerns about like the rear wheel drive conversion on these cars. I'm like, this wasn't meant to have this weight distribution. It doesn't. It felt like a little sketchy, like almost more than like Porsche sketchy on the wheel. I was like, yeah, this is getting a little light for me. Yeah, so there's some weird things going on with that car, but I would like to drive, I don't want to discount the gated R8 just based on that, because I do think I was just driving like an almost expired clutch, and it was a weird spec of that vehicle. But
It just seems like one of the most approachable. I just used a P there. Vehicles in the segment.
For sure.
It just that I would be able to daily drive, that I could confidently drive in any weather, that would be relatively okay to maintain because it's nothing crazy. That V8's been out for a century.
Yes.
It just seems really awesome. I feel like by the time I'll be able to afford it, it'll be like what happened with the NSX, where when it was $25,000, I was like, that's the car I'm going to buy. And then when I could afford it, it was $40,000. And when I could afford the 40, now it's 60. And when I can afford the 60, it's 100. And I feel like the R8 is going to elude me in the same way, but I'm going to go for it.
I'd say go for it. It's a cool car. And it's funny. When I first drove an R8, I remember thinking like, wow, this is a business suit. This is very approachable and usable. I'm forgetting what I'm driving. The first R8 I drove was like the current generation, or like it was the Gen 2, right when that came out. And it was a base R8, it wasn't the Plus. But I remember driving it and it had the paddles and all. I mean, they all do now, but I remember thinking, like, I did my video and I was driving it home and I was just like back on Route 9 or something. And I remember just being bored. And I was like, how cool is it that I'm bored in this car? This is amazing. I'm driving an A4 with a V10 right now. This is nuts. Like that I am like in traffic and I only remembered what I'm driving because I went by a glass building and looked at it. It was nuts.
And it's crazy that that's an amazing quality in a car like that it's it can be forgettable at times. And I know this is a hot take a little bit, but the only car that's ever made me feel that way was, other than that, and I wasn't bored, but I got the vibe, was the BMW M1. It is everyone thinks, oh my God, it's like a hardcore race car thing. And like, yeah, it can do that. But if you drive an original M1, it is like so docile. It has ground clearance. It can take a bump, and you're like, why? Like, why can this do that? Yeah. And it is the R8 of the early 80s. It is incredible. That is really cool to know that a car that if you just drove it normally is normal. You could, even though it's something that's perceived to be just so, like you said, hardcore.
Absolutely, yeah. It is weird when you meet some of the hero cars and you're like, oh, that's not what I thought you'd be like. I thought you'd be terrifying. Whenever you drive an M1, you're like, this is normal.
And especially in that era where there's so many sort of like homologated special cars that were just absolute bastards to drive on the street, that weren't suited for it at all. I think that's that there is one that is.
Yeah, I think it's a testament. I think that's a testament to BMW actually making a car for the people they were selling it to. Whereas, like, because at the time, what were they been selling, like 3.0 CSIs, or was it too late? That was like mid 70s. But still, like, they were still making that car for people to drive, which is bonkers. They didn't have to. That could have been the most miserable thing ever. Which is, I guess Porsche did the same thing with the 959. Everyone who's ever driven a 959 Comfort has basically come back and been like, yeah, don't waste your time hunting this one down. If it comes along, drive it, but if you don't worry yourself.
Yeah, and oh man, I mean, this is a story for another day.
No,
but like
there's no other days. This is great.
The M1 connection with Lamborghini and how BMW, built it is just like, it leads me to, I love the what could have been stories in the automotive world. And how I'm so curious as to how much the car would have differed if Lamborghini wasn't in a bad financial position and they couldn't produce the car. Like, what if they did it? How different would it have been than the product BMW did? Is this like a Braun GP Formula One deal where it was pretty much a Honda with a Mercedes engine, or is this a completely different machine?
I wonder if I don't know enough history about that engine, but that engine is essentially what ended up in the 1988 M5 and that straight six. And I wonder if, had Lamborghini kept the car or whatever and did their thing and built, put a V12 in it or whatever they were going to do, had BMW not really had that piece in it, would the M5 have ever gotten that engine?
Yeah, totally, right? Which is like 90% of the reason why the E28 M5 is as cool as it is because it has that engine.
So like exactly. Like if BMW had just like gotten what they paid Lamborghini to do, would we have ever gotten a 1988 E28 M5 with that ridiculous straight six?
Which, are those still good buys, or are they now priced to infinity? Because I had the chance to get one for $25,000 when I bought the C4S instead. Ooh. And I feel like I don't know if I made the right call, because I feel like that's the car where I look back and be like, oh, when I was 27, I had the chance to get one for $25,000, and it's like $1 million car in 2 years.
If it was a matching numbers car and you weren't afraid to put a little money into a suspension refresh, I think you probably could have gotten 40 for that car.
Got it. Okay, that's good to know.
But yeah, I don't know. Like they're up there, and that's the thing. I mean, that's assuming it had 150,000 miles, right? Like,
yeah, totally.
Right. I mean, if that was like a 30,000 mile car, like that's an EAS call for price car. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. No doubt. Yeah, but there's so many rabbit holes. Like, what if McLaren went through with Honda for the engine of the F1 instead of BMW? What would that have looked like? What if Porsche actually made the 919 Street from their like Porsche Unseen series last week, which was cooler than cool, by the way. The 904 that came out of that was the coolest thing ever.
So all right. So tell me, which 904 are you talking about right now?
Okay, so Porsche last week did, which by the way was amazing that they did
that new render of the new 904. I've seen that.
Yeah, so they made it. It's based on the same carbon monocoque of the Volkswagen XL1. Do you remember that thing? The thing that looked like a freaking stormtrooper?
Yes. All right, now it's coming back to me.
It used the same engine out of the XL Sport, which was the Ducati 1199 V2. So they put in a 1200 V2 engine into a car that weighed under 2,000 pounds, and they were like, this is the new 904. Weird. And it makes perfect sense based on what the old 904 was. And looking at it, you're like, fuck, why didn't they make this thing? It'd be so awesome.
The coolest, so did you notice that, if memory serves, I remember looking at the picture of it, and the only thing that stood out more than the car was the wheels, because they were just 997 turbo wheels.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. You hyper designed this car. And then you were like, yeah, what are we going to put on this? And you were like, yeah, just throw those bad boys on there. I mean, they're great wheels. I just thought it was very bizarre.
For sure, yeah. Of all the choices to use.
All the choices.
I mean, yeah, they did. They're nice wheels, but yeah, I'm looking at it right now. That's so funny.
So there was a 904 delivered to a guy in California recently, and it turns out that's the 904 I was in. I rode passenger in this 904 a few months ago, and because we were getting it ready for sale, and then it eventually ended up where it ended up. But I got to spend a day with a 904, and
that's killer.
It was nuts. Like, I'm literally, and I didn't drive it, but I got to be like passenger in this thing, just like ripping around in this, the 4-cam 4-cylinder. Like, what on earth am I in? This is nuts. It really, that car was like legitimately incredible. And man, I like Porsche. I'm glad they do stuff like this, because Porsche is getting like, even all the PTS stuff, and I'm not like shitting on it, but it's like kind of like, okay, everybody has it now. Like everything is so
PTS isn't special anymore. It's almost like buying a non-AMG G-Wagon. It's more special.
Yeah, I agree. It's almost like, whoa, you got like a base black Carrera? Cool.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Like I didn't even know you could get this without a sunroof. Like that's, you know what I mean? Like that's what I'm talking about now when it's like, oh, this is rare because it's so bizarre. Why would anybody do this? And it is cool to see Porsche start to expand a little bit and get like creative and make some crazy shit. I mean, yeah, they did the 935 thing, and Zwart has that, and they're doing the Pikes Peak thing. But yeah, I definitely like. I always get excited for the special projects at Porsche because we really haven't seen anything. Like, have we seen anything that exciting since the 918 Spider?
Nothing of that caliber.
Not on that level, right?
For sure. Which was what made that sort of Porsche Unseen series last week really cool. There was a couple duds. Like they showed a Macan Vision Safari, which was just like a wide body looking Macan. But other than that, everything else that was shown off was really, really cool. And to me, the two best things were the 904 Living Legend that we talked about, and then the 919 Street that was effectively the Le Mans car, but just in street car kit, which just floods my mind with the memories of like the McLaren F1s and CLK GTRs and like all those cars that are roaming the street. I'm like, that's cool, man. And to see that they made, even if it was a 1-to-1 scale model, it's really, really cool.
I also saw there were some spy shots of a 992 that looked like it was a safari car. It was like a little bit jacked up. It had some big flares and stuff. So I'm like, oh, all right, maybe we're going to go in a new direction with the 911. Like maybe we're going to get some new variants of a 911 that just have not existed ever for production.
Would that piss you off if they came out with like a 992, 911, we'll call it OV for Overland? Would that frustrate you?
No,
okay.
I would be thrilled because I think that the idea that you can do anything with a 911 is the most important thing about the 911. And,
sure.
You know, I know that my car is a garage queen, but it's certainly not built to handle a winter. But it's like when I see people with like a new 911 turbo and then they're like, oh yeah, it's winter, I better put it away. It's like, no, dude, like turbos are literally meant to be your everyday driver.
Without a doubt.
You're supposed to put some snow tires on it and you're supposed to send it. And like people like Lee Keen with their Safari cars are proving that like you can take these old cars, you can do what you need to do to them, you jack them up and they will rip through like lakes, through like overlanding stuff. They'll jump, they'll do anything. And I would love nothing more than to see Porsche, what's the word?
Come out with like an all-road 911.
Yeah, to kind of just like just to say like, yeah, we're listening. Like, because that's the thing, the market is there that exists. I mean, people like
for sure.
Lee Keen can't build enough cars. He literally can't build enough cars, and that's great. He's got work for the rest of his life, and
definitely
that's incredible. And it means that the market wants it the same way that like the market wants like a hot rod air cooler. That's why Singer exists. That's why what's Peter Nam's brand? Oh God, he does the 993s. Gunther Works, yeah. You know, there's a lot of these cars that, you know, those are all based off of like the market wanting a thing. So somebody filled the void. Whereas like Porsche, I mean, yeah, Porsche can't go back in time and make air-cooled cars. They're not going to do that. But what they can do is they can take their new cars and make them function the way the market wants to use them. And it would just be so nuts to be able to, even if it's of a short run, to get like, you know, the Baja 911 or something like that. It'd be nuts.
Yeah, and it's not like they don't have the history for it. I mean, they ran the things at frickin' Dakar. You know?
Exactly. Yeah, it's exactly what it's supposed to do. So I don't know, man. I think the future of cars is not as bleak as everyone likes to make it out to be. I mean, I know we're seeing that the internal combustion engine's getting banned in 15 years pretty much everywhere in the world. I don't necessarily have such a like worried approach to that because I think that the automotive industry is always going to cater to the market, and there's still a very large market of people who want weird shit, fast shit, and interesting stuff.
Yeah, and just to back that up even more, it's not like we're not getting good things anymore. I mean, the GR Yaris just came out, and people are putting that in like their top 10 of cars ever reviewed. And then you have companies like Porsche that we've talked about that are investing, you know, millions of dollars in synthetic fuels to sort of keep that like ICE engine thing going, even in a post, petrol fuel banned world. So there's definitely going to be a market for it, for sure.
Oh, man. What do you think is going to happen with the current classics? Like, all right, so let's just take like a Malibu Cars and Coffee thing, right? Like, let's look at like, here you got Jay Leno coming in like a Duesenberg. You've got Bruce Meyer rolling in a Le Mans 250 short wheelbase Ferrari, like fucking crazy stuff. Like, I think that people see the date and they go, oh, by 2030 or 2035, no internal combustion. It doesn't mean those cars come off the road.
Right. There's not a big fire where everyone has to drop their cars into a burner and boom goes history. This isn't Fahrenheit 911 with old classic cars.
So like, what do we do about that? Like, how do we reconcile this? Because I don't hate the earth more than I love cars. Did I say that the right direction?
Don't hate the earth more. Yeah, I think that.
Right? Okay. Because
that checks out.
I'm okay with a shift in technology for air quality. Because guess what? I breathe air every day. Every day I breathe air.
Yep.
I really need it. And I have asthma. So like the fact that like someone's trying to improve air quality, like I'm not actually complaining about that. But I mean, does that mean that I think like everyone should not drive these? No, I think that normal commuters, most people do not care about cars. I feel so bad for most people who have to buy a car because they don't even like cars. Like I don't have to buy a piano, but imagine if I had to buy a piano just to get where I need or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's so stupid.
Yeah, I'm definitely not on the quote for just being vulgar. I'm not on the fuck electric cars train.
Not at all.
But the good news is that every day automakers are getting progressively better and better. I mean, look at the RAV4. I think this is probably going to be the first and last time the RAV4 is talked about on this podcast. But that's an SUV that averages 40 fucking miles to the gallon today, which is wild, right? So as we're contemplating phasing out internal combustion cars. They're constantly getting better, So people want to drive these SUVs. If they have to maintain to a certain EPA standard, we're going to increase the efficiency of these SUVs. And we'll get cars like the RAV4 Prime that get, I think it's like 60 miles on just electric before they swap to a crazy hybrid or something like that. So I'm okay with it because it just challenges these companies to do what they're doing today better. And I like electric cars. Electric cars are great. The Taycan's cool. The Model S is fine. The Model 3 Performance is a really cool car. The Rivian, all the Rivians. I don't know if you saw, the Rivian has a freaking kitchen.
Dude, it's incredible.
Where you can pull out a kitchen that has an induction stovetop on it. Like that's
legends.
Cool, man.
Like, yeah, we're talking, everyone wants to go camping with their cars now. And it's like, okay, well, there you go. There's the thing. I see, maybe I'm naive and maybe I'm not thinking it through enough, but when I think of, everyone's going to be driving electric cars, I'm like, well, that's just going to prolong the amount of time I get to drive my gas cars, because it's like the internal combustion car will live on in its purest form, which is basically the legacy of all the cool shit that we've got, and like the small coach builders like Glickenhaus and I don't know, they're not coach builder, but you know what I'm saying? Like these smaller companies, like maybe, I mean, granted that's not like a people's car, but I think what you would see is smaller boutique companies coming up and building interesting things. Like maybe like everything goes electric and suddenly like Honda, Volvo, Toyota, BMW, everyone's electric, except now comes along this small company in Detroit that's going to build like, the next S2000. And it's going to have a really advanced internal combustion engine. And because they're produced in such small numbers, they get away with certain emission things and they get away with certain safety things. That, to me, I think like could potentially extend the life of enthusiast-driven cars. Because to be honest, 90% of what's on the market today does not interest me in the least bit.
Right. And that's the other thing, too. There's only a bunch of really, really, really good cars.
I know, when you think about
today.
It, like,
if we lost it, I mean, again, I don't want to lose, I'm not saying I want to lose internal combustion cars. That's way too strong of a statement. But if we lost them today, what are we missing really, aside from like amazing 911s, really cool McLarens, and I don't know. Maybe that's too strong of a statement to make because I really like internal combustion engine cars, but it's not like, this is the late 90s where it's just nothing but hits are coming out every day out of everyone.
And I'm not saying we've hit like peak internal combustion engine. It can always go crazier. I mean, look at Koenigsegg with the free valves and all this nutty things, right? But like at the end of the day, if you said, Tom, you can have one car, you're going to have to deal with this car and daily drive it and also enjoy your life with it as an auto enthusiast, and you just have to choose wisely. Guess what? I'm getting a 991.2 GT3 Touring, and I'm going to live the rest of my life at 9,000 RPM with relatively limited space for groceries and people, and that's fine. I don't need more. I would never drive that car and 20 years later be like, man, this really sucks. I wish they continued making better. Like, fuck that. It's fine. So
yeah,
I guess
totally.
what I'm saying is like, maybe I'm just a curmudgeon and maybe I'm a little too optimistic in certain regards, but like, I'm kind of okay with what exists today. And if I had to carry it on through the rest of my life, I don't think I'd be that disappointed because I like older shit anyway.
Definitely. Yeah. And I also don't think it's going away.
No.
I think there is going to be some sort of synthetic fuel solution that Porsche's investing in or whatever that keeps this going, because the fact of the matter is internal combustion engines are still improving. Mazda's Skyactiv X thing where they get a bajillion MPG out of their cars, or even the Volkswagen XL1 that got like 100 MPG off gas. Like there is the potential to do really, really well with internal combustion, So I understand maybe banning it in cities like New York or whatever, but where they shouldn't have them, quite frankly.
No.
Everyone should be driving electric smarts in London.
No,
Everyone.
and like that's what I can't understand about like the fuck electric people, because I'm like, go stand next to an idling diesel truck for like 10 minutes and just breathe deep and then really tell me that's the way you want to live.
Right.
Like it's not good. It really isn't. And then the other side of it is if you put people in a Tesla or a Taycan or, any electric car today and say like, go commute in this for a week and come back and report on what you think, they would literally be like different people. They would enter that car at the beginning of the week, grumpy and miserable and hating traffic and fuck work. I hate commuting, blah, blah. And they would come back and be like, this is relaxing. I feel better having driven this car, because the reason I love internal combustion engines is because the engine is an extension of my energy and my mood. And like, if I'm in a grumpy or aggressive mood, I'm going to rev the engine out a little more. I'm going to be a little more abusive to it. Whereas like, when you drive an electric car, there's nothing that matches your mood. So if you're pissed off and angry and you like launch out of a green light like quickly, you never get the satisfaction of like the echo chamber of your engine. So it's like you don't have anyone egging you on trying to amplify your already pissed off mood. Whereas you drive these cars and it's just relaxing and it's like, hey, calm down. It's going to be okay. Like, there's something so incredible about that. Like I did a drive-in in Model S to and from New York a couple times, and I didn't even care about the traffic. The traffic was like enjoyable. It was like, oh, we can look at things. Isn't this nice?
Right. Yeah. It's funny because in my random ass car ownership, one car that slotted in there was the Chevy Volt. I bought a 2014 in 2017 brand new off the lot Chevrolet Volt, and your comments right there are spot on. Like I could get in that car and floor it, pissed at the world or whatever, and it would just, lightly chirp the tires and just go. And I would hear nothing, and I would just be cool, calm, collected, and honestly just relaxed regardless of situation. Yeah. And I got better parking than handicap at most locations.
True, especially because that was a proper EV. It was actually it only ever drove the wheels based on electricity.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So it was great. It is one of the best daily driving experiences out there as an electric car. And for those that don't like it, I definitely urge them to at least give it a shot. Like, it's worth Turoing. Everyone has a Model 3 or Model S on Turo these days for relatively cheap. Get out there, or even do an overnight drive. A lot of the Tesla dealerships, if you sweet talk them enough, will give you a whatever Tesla for the night.
I'm with you.
So
I'm with you. Well, I think we've determined that Porsche's still fantastic. Electric cars are okay, and that Lamborghini still makes no fucking sense.
In the best way possible.
In the best way. Why? I don't understand them. It's like, man, I don't even have analogies for Lamborghini. I don't understand it, but hey.
Yeah, they are definitely an enigma, for sure.
They just keep on trucking. Good for them. Thank you so much for coming on. I needed this. It's been a little while since I've done a podcast. I took like a 2 or 3 week hiatus, mostly because YouTube has been going bananas, and it makes more money than this, because this doesn't make money. So I was like, I think I need to focus my energy on that so I can.
Yep,
I'd like to eat. That's always good.
Food is fine.
But yeah, go check out your podcast, The Money Shift, your YouTube channel, The Money Shift. And my goodness, thank you for coming on. And anytime you need to vent about things that piss you off in the car world, you know how to reach me. I'm willing to have a conversation.
I am more than willing to be the voodoo doll. So thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
I'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Isn't he great? What do you think, man? I love talking with him. His podcast is fantastic. He's the guy who, if you see him at a car show, you're like, I'm going to go walk around the car show with him, because he's entertaining. You can always play off of each other. He's ready for a joke. He's ready to return the joke. Yeah, not everybody's like that. I appreciate that. But thank you so much for listening. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one.